I run a venture capital fund, so it's just a coincidence that I was following another venture capitalist. But I'm going to talk really about the infrastructure we've laid down in India. I think this morning Larry mentioned that the innovation of the future is really going to be tying things together with something that's already in place. And while that's true, I think in India we find that certainly you can just look outside this outside this hotel, and a lot of things are broken. And while the physical infrastructure is broken, I think we're all very lucky that the government chose to invest very heavily in rethinking the digital infrastructure and grabbing this opportunity. And Aadhaar, which was the foundation of this, was the start. If you go back to what Larry said earlier as well in terms of Uber itself, Uber is a company that connected the dots very intelligently and executed brilliantly. The same thing is true with Airbnb. But really, the government technology stopped with GPS, which was actually one of the last acts Clinton did when he put it into the public domain. And after that, 3 or 4 companies, whether it's Google for the maps layer, which is why Uber is now doing its own maps, Android and iOS, of course, owned by 2 companies, as well as the payments networks. All of these have been done by proprietary private sector. And in India, because the building blocks needed a lot more to be done, the government stepped in and has put together a very powerful set of building blocks, and that's what I'll talk about. The underlying assumption and theme here is that if you do layered innovation, as has been done with, which is what led to Uber or Airbnb, then you can have mass flourishing as opposed to when you do everything in a full stack model. So Aadhaar, when it was designed, was always designed to be as minimalistic as possible, right? And really Aadhaar does only one thing, and it does it extremely well and at an incredibly low cost. I think we talked about eKYC, and I'll talk about that later. The cost of eKYC at a runtime level to the government in terms of technology infrastructure is 0.1 paise. It's an unbelievable number. If all of us did 1,000 transactions each a year, it would cost the government 1 rupee. So that's how powerful the technology is, and because it's very, very minimal. And then layered on top of it, we've built out a complete openness so that the right type of devices can come in and the right type of applications can be built on top of it. So this morning I received a video, and
more unbanked people than any other country. Since 2009, India has added new pieces to its financial infrastructure. It has built 3 interconnected layers: a biometric identity database, simplified payments addressing, and market-wide digital payments interoperability. Together, called India Stack, these new layers have the potential to bring dramatic change. To see how it works, let's meet Seema, a garment worker who migrated to Bangalore from a rural region of Odisha. As a migrant, she does not have a permanent address, and banks often require multiple ID documents to open an account. In 2009, the Indian government created the Unique Identification Authority of India, which has enabled over 1 billion residents, including Seema, to easily obtain an identity number linked to their biometric data. Using only her identity number and biometrics, Seema can now open an account quickly. And the electronic identity allows financial service providers to instantly conduct KYC checks. A second layer of infrastructure allows Seema to link her identification number, phone number, and bank account number under a simplified payments address. This address can be easily shared with her employer to receive her salary digitally. The third layer is a market-wide interoperable payments system. Seema can now use her phone to send money instantly to her mother, who has also recently opened an account at a different provider. Her mother can withdraw the funds in rural Odisha using only her ID number and her fingerprints. 2 additional layers are being added: the DigiLocker, where people can securely upload digital copies of personal documents, such as academic records, vehicle registrations, or birth certificates; and a new system for e-consent, enabling people to selectively share their personal documents and data. These new layers would allow SEMA to share her key financial documents to apply for a loan or access other services. Together, the layers form a new national infrastructure connecting business, government, and hundreds of millions of people like SEMA to the financial system.
The layers that we're collectively calling India Stack, and it's a term that's starting to be used quite a bit around the world, actually. Though it doesn't exist as an entity or an organization, it's just a very loose collection of these layers, where the foundation was, is Aadhaar. The combination of that, everybody getting a bank account, which is what the J stands for, Jan Dhan, which is for the bank account, A for Aadhaar, and M for everybody having a mobile phone, is really what is the foundation, as we call that we call JAM. And very similar to the slide I showed you earlier, what we believe will happen is with the open architecture and the open layers that are already present, one will be able to open an account remotely, one will be able to transact digitally, one will be able to avail of a loan completely from your mobile phone. And none of this is the future. It is all the present, it's all happening today, and I'll show you some astounding numbers. So let's dive into these. I'm sure almost everybody in the room today has gone through Aadhaar enrollment if you're a legal resident of India. There used to be a day when I would say, how many people here have Aadhaar? And in a hall like this, mine would be the only hand standing. But today, I'm sure everybody does, so that's awesome. But it's important to understand how the enrollment process took place. What really happened was we all went through a one-time, common sort of brute force enrollment into the system, where we all shared name, address, date of birth, gender, phone number, email address, and a photograph. We gave all 10 fingerprints and 2 iris scans. So what happened after that was all this data was sent to a central server. It was compared with the biometrics of everybody that previously came into the system. And only if there wasn't a match was a new ID generated. Right? So you can be sure that you can go back and try any number of times from any other corner of the country, you will not get a new identity. Aadhaar is unique for that one reason, unless your biometrics have substantially changed. But if we assume that biometrics don't substantially change over life, you will not get another Aadhaar, right? Of course, you could be unfortunate and have a flood and lose everything and forget your number. Now you go back and re-enroll, and it will pick up your old ID and say, this is who you are, this is your ID. So what this means here is, now that you have a 12-digit number, by the way, the Aadhaar document that you all have, that little piece of paper, has no intelligence in it, and it is not meant to be used as a paper document at all. It has absolutely no value. The only thing that's of value is your 12-digit number and an online authentication, which means that anybody, anywhere, can authenticate you. Your document is not your ID, you are your ID. It's also very important when we designed Aadhaar, we said, it does not say anything about me. The only thing I can prove is my identity. Most Americans, when you ask them, show me your ID proof, they will pull out a driver's license. In India, we took the approach that a driver's license isn't an ID. A driver's license says that Sanjay is allowed to drive a car. An ID is one that says, I am Sanjay. Right? So there's a difference between identity and entitlement, and we've made that very, very explicit here in India. Of course, they might print your Aadhaar number on your driver's license, and you might use that as an integrated document. But to be very clear, identity has got nothing to do with entitlement. Right? Identity is one for everybody. The way you verify somebody's identity is with an online API that is exposed by the government, and anybody can write a software application that collects the data that you share with them and verify it against the government's database. If the data matches, they will get a digitally signed response valid in a court of law saying this has matched. If it doesn't match, you will just get a response saying that it did not match, but you will never get the data out of the system. Right? So that's as far as authentication is concerned. It's very important to understand that. The next layer we introduced was a paperless layer, which is where you can do electronic KYC. And I think anybody here who's got a geo connection? Yep, handful of you, all of you would have gone through that, and there are several other service providers offering that. This allows you on the basis of a successful authentication to allow to consent to the government to share your data with a requesting service provider. And that's how you can open an account, whether it's for a bank account, whether it's for insurance, whether it is for investing in a mutual fund or a telecom connection. Now, what happened was when we started the Aadhaar program, the lowest cost iris camera in the world was $2,000. $2,000, 90,000 rupees at the time because the rupee was at 45. Now it's even more. But innovators saw the opportunity and realized that with a slight modification, a cell phone camera could be converted with an IR sensor to be an iris camera. That was good enough not for necessarily for enrollment, but certainly for authentication. And Samsung has released this tablet at 12,000 rupees. There is another one I've seen, a mobile phone at under 7,000 rupees. And this is going to be flooded in the market, but within a couple of years, you're going to be able to go and buy a $100 phone, which will have Aadhaar iris biometric authentication, which is the highest grade, one of the highest grades you can think of for biometric authentication, commoditized. Right? So you have to assume that anything you're designing here for the future is going to assume that iris authentication is going to be a commodity in the future. And it's essentially going to be free. Why? Because it costs the government 0.1 paisa to run this thing. So this is an example for those who have not seen of the geo experience. This is me getting my geo connections. It's very poorly shot. This is in a tiny, tiny store in Bangalore. And I've just blurred out my Aadhaar card, so to speak, document. But I actually did not edit this because I had 2 bad reads, and then the third time I got it right. And what it's doing here is I've given him my 12-digit number, and he's captured my fingerprint, and I've given consent for electronic KYC, which means if my authentication is successful, share my data with Reliance Jio. And you'll notice here, just for a fraction, there you go. All 9 pieces of data. Name, address, date of birth, gender, phone number, email address, and photograph were digitally shared, digitally signed, and shared with Jio in a matter of 3 seconds. Right? 3 might be 10, but it's a fraction. 0 paper. When I was volunteering at Aadhaar, I did an analysis of the telecom industry, which at the time was signing up 18 million new subscribers a month. And that actually with churn was more like 50 million subscribers a month. 50 million subscribers is about 1.6 million a day. 1.6 million a day translates to 25 per second. When you do that, 25 people get a SIM card somewhere in India. So 1.6 million SIM cards a day translates essentially to roughly about 1,000 trees that are cut every day just so people can get a SIM card. And if that doesn't scare you, 1 million trees in 3 years should. Right? So that's the scale, and this is one industry doing KYC. And all of us who have invested in mutual funds, I know there are several people here from that from the financial services sector. You know, when the bank makes you sign sideways and upside down and all these contortions, unnecessary, absolutely unnecessary, right? And that's where we are today, right? So we are, tearing down this environment, and that's when people show slides of, global warming, right? It's no surprise. But electronic KYC will go a long way, and Jio has shown the way with. They're doing 4 million KYCs a day themselves. The third thing we said was, why can't I sign a document, right? Today we have digital signatures where anybody who's on the board of directors of a company has got a USB dongle that is generally with your accountant, who's at liberty to sign any document on your behalf to file your tax returns, etc. Why can't we do this with Aadhaar? And the income tax department has now launched this, so you will be able to sign and file your returns by just getting an OTP on your phone and entering it if you have linked your mobile number to Aadhaar. And this will be, again, a digitally signed document, right? And all of us should start using this now. It's freely available. It costs, I don't know, maybe 5 rupees or something like that is what people charge. There are service providers building on top of this specification where now we can sign documents for a fraction of the cost, and you can have multi-party people signing contracts and so on. So the third layer is electronic signatures. And then we said, where do we store all these digital documents? So the government has launched an initiative called DigiLocker. In fact, the first version was launched by the government. It was called DigiLocker, which is the government's implementation. But any startup can implement digital locker, okay? And there's a standard set of APIs and specifications. And essentially what this does is an issuer can essentially share documents into a Dropbox-like system, but the documents themselves are typically digitally signed by the issuer. And to give you some examples, today, within 6 months of launch, we have, or a year of launch, we have 1.6 billion documents. Sorry, Americans, you'll have to deal with our commas. It's slightly different here in India. But that's roughly 1.6 billion documents in the system, issued digitally by different government agencies. Today, most state driver's licenses can be linked to your DigiLocker account, and there is an app you can download on Android, link your Aadhaar number, and you can digitize and pull your driver's license in digital form from the repository of the state government. And guess what? You can walk into an airport today in India showing this as your identity. It's a non-fakeable, digitally signed ID. All 10th grade marks cards of the CBSE system were issued last year, originally into the DigiLocker, and then a paper copy was given to individuals, right? So we talk about innovation, and I'm from the private sector, and we've always laughed about, had it not been for the government, we could have been doing this, we could have been doing that. Here is an example where the government is leading the way and adopting and showing how technology can be used. And then last but not least, there's one more actually, but one of the most important ones here is UPI, the Unified Payment Interface. How many people here use BHIM? Yep, quite a few. BHIM to me is the best payments application in the world, period, right? I've seen tons of them. I've been an entrepreneur in that sector. I have used several apps from around the world. The simplicity of this app beats anything that's out there, right? But BHIM is the front-end application that you can choose to use. You can use anything else from your bank. But here's an app introduced by the government which works across all bank accounts, across all phones, and you can download it and set up your account in a matter of minutes, and then you're up and running. But UPI as a layer, it's really, to me, it's the equivalent of what Jio has done in the telecom industry with a pure 4G network. Here we have a pure 4th generation payments infrastructure, which is real-time, interbank, and absolutely the lowest cost possible. Whatever cost is going to be charged for BHIM, it's a business model question for the banks, but the actual underlying transaction costs are as close to zero, right? UPI is very interesting because we've also done several global firsts here. You can use an app of any bank or of no bank, which is BHIM, to transact with your bank account, the best application in the market for a certain segment, and it doesn't matter if the customer banks with you, right? So what it does is, if you're a bank CEO now, you start looking at different metrics to see how successful your business is running. In the past, it was, what are my current accounts, what are my savings accounts, but in the future, it's going to be which other bank's customer is using my account, because that's an opportunity for me to upsell you, because I control your front-end experience. At the same time, if you notice your customer is working with some other bank's application, guess what? That customer is likely to churn out of your system, right? Because with a front-facing, zero-cost iris camera lying on my cell phone, my KYC costs are zero, my switching cost is zero. So in the past, the reason all of us got our bank account was because our employer said, open an account with ICICI Bank, and we opened that account, and then ICICI Bank pounced on us and said, how about I give you home loan, a car loan, fixed deposit, I'll manage your investments, etc. And we're all vested into one bank, and we don't even check to see what the competitive market landscape is. The reason is because switching costs were very high. But with switching costs going to zero, I will look for a product for that particular use case of mine and pick the best product and the best experience. UPI has started growing. We're seeing already hundreds or thousands of applications in the Play Store. Between October and March, you can see how many new apps are UPI apps already in the Play Store. And I can download any one of these apps, link my bank account with whichever bank I'm banking with, and be up and running in a matter of seconds. So that's the choice given to the consumer now. But wait, the world's biggest and best and most frequently used applications for other purposes are also now integrating UPI. Truecaller just launched integrated payments with ICICI Bank, and there's very strong rumors now that WhatsApp is coming with a UPI implementation where you can do P2P payments or God knows what, or merchant payments merely by using the WhatsApp experience, right? So the disruption is also going to hit the Indian startup ecosystem because it means now that the world's biggest and best startups and fastest moving, ones who care most about the customer experience, they're all going to be participating on this level playing field. Above UPI, the last layer here is the consent layer. So we had Aadhaar for identity, we had electronic KYC for account opening, we had electronic signatures for document signing and contracting, we had a digital locker for storing these documents, we had a unified payment interface for real-time payment transactions. And now, when I share data with somebody, I want to make sure that they're not misusing this data for any other purpose, right? So when I share my phone bill because the bank wants to know how much I pay on my phone bill and my utility bill before they give me a loan, I don't want them calling me 6 months later saying, how about a car loan, how about a home loan? I just wanted a short-term loan, right? It was a one-time thing. Now, with consent, you can specify who gets to see what and for what purpose, and that's the next level that's coming out. Again, as I said, none of this is the future, it's all the present. These numbers from Aadhaar are as of September last year, so they're growing. 13.5 million authentications a day, and eKYC a few months ago was at 4 million eKYCs a day, with the government being the largest user and Geo being the next largest user. These are some staggering numbers. 1.13 billion people in the Aadhaar system today. We enrolled the country of Singapore every week for the last 7 years, right? That's what it took to get here. And I think, all the other numbers are probably dated. Beam has got itself more than 10 million downloads. UPI transactions are scaling extremely fast. As of probably a month ago, we were already doing 250,000 UPI transactions daily with a volume in excess of, I'm trying to convert the numbers, but it was an average of 5,000 rupees per transaction. So people have started using UPI in earnest now. There's also a massive ecosystem building up, regardless of what area you look at, whether it's for authentication, whether it's for e-signs, whether it's for DigiLocker, which is where today we have one provider, but soon we should have many. Banks adopting Aadhaar and banks adopting UPI for payments. So this is a very fast-growing ecosystem here. And once again, because it's layered innovation and because it's specific APIs that are opened, developers are starting to use this more and more. And of course, the government itself has started innovating with a number of hackathons and things like that to get the developer ecosystem more and more energized. To add to this, there's more transparency coming in with GST, which hopefully should go live later this year. We are expecting to process 5 billion invoices a month, right, across the 7 million plus businesses here in India. And that will also bring a lot more data transparency, which will help the banks to do either invoice discounting or giving working capital loans, because all the data will be available. Bill payments is going to again launch pretty soon as is an interoperable manner. Once again, you're going to see over 1 billion bills paid every month. And then you have electronic toll collection, which is also going to go completely digital and interoperable. Really what's going to happen is the collection of all this means that there is going to be a lot of data available digitally, and the opportunity for India to start providing a great consumer experience for somebody like Rajani today who cannot get a loan no matter how hard she tries because there just isn't a digital footprint of this person. That's going to be possible. So I'm going to close with a small demo here of what one of our startups, MoneyTap, is doing in terms of digital lending. This is an app, again, you download on Android and hopefully soon on iOS, and get into a conversation with the server and give it all your information. So the information will be, share your Aadhaar details, and at the back end, the system is now going to do an authentication to confirm that these are all the right data. Then, share some of your salary information or whatever you would normally need to share with the bank. But all this is done in a matter of, a few minutes, right? So now the system is, asking you your monthly salary. and now that's been entered, now you can, it'll ask you for a little more information. This whole demo runs for a couple of minutes. Right, it's now verifying your eligibility, so the back end, it's codified all the business rules that the bank might have for giving you a loan approval, and in a matter of a few minutes, you get an instant approval. Right, now you say, I accept the terms of this bank's offer, and eventually it'll be a marketplace with multiple banks, and now it will take you through the process of actually going the full KYC with the bank and uploading all the digital documents or sharing the digital documents, so that you can get the loan approved instantaneously, and in a matter of a few minutes, money can use the real-time, the bank can use the real-time interface and deposit money into your bank account. Right. In fact, the second part of it is the rest of the application. But so what are we saying here, right? Today, to get a loan, one would need to fill out an application, submit it to a bank or to a loan aggregator, wait several weeks for, back and forth, getting an approval. Once you get an approval, you now sign a contract, get the money to your bank account, transact with that money, typically in cash these days, earn money back, deposit it in your bank account, and then repay the loan. And that's the sort of full cycle. All of this can be done digitally from a cell phone. And that, we believe, will bring more and more people. Because of this, the cost of servicing these customers will go down. The cost of onboarding the customer, the cost of servicing the customer, the cost of collections is going to go down. And with all that, we think we can lead to a virtuous cycle from the financial services sector. So I do want to make a point that this is not just about financial services. This is about everything we do. There are already people looking at applying this for electronic patient records. There are people looking at this from education records and several other use cases. But bottom line is, all of us live in a country where we look at physical infrastructure that's been lagging, and yes, that will probably continue to lag. But on the digital infrastructure front, we have already leapfrogged, and I think the future for India is going to be largely, innovating for the rest of the world in a digital manner. So we like to believe that, I'll close with a controversial statement, right? It's the right thing to do. But yes, the Valley sort of innovated for the first billion users. India is going to innovate for the next 7 billion in the world. So thanks a lot, and if you think India's opportunity has not arrived, it has now. Thank you.